The coffee dripped down my face in slow motion, each drop carrying away a piece of the confidence I'd spent months rebuilding. I stood frozen at the break room counter, watching Claudine's hand pull back from the tilted mug, her perfectly manicured nails still gripping the ceramic handle. The smell hit me first, burnt synthetic fibers mixing with hazelnut roast, and then came the laughter. It started with Claudine's high-pitched cackle, then spread like poison through the dozen coworkers gathered for morning coffee. My brand-new wig, the one I'd saved 3 paychecks to afford after alopecia stole my real hair, was ruined. But worse than the ruined wig was the way Claudine turned to the crowd and said, loud enough for the entire floor to hear, "Come on, everyone laugh. It's just a wig." My throat tightened as more voices joined in, and I realized this wasn't an accident at all. This was deliberate cruelty, and my supervisor had just made me her morning entertainment in front of the entire Chicago office of Hartwell Marketing Group. I'm Alana, 29 years old, and until that morning, I thought I'd finally turned a corner. For 2 years, I'd watched my hair fall out in clumps, the autoimmune disease stealing not just my appearance but my sense of self. Every mirror became an enemy, every photograph a reminder of what I'd lost. When I finally saved enough for a custom wig that looked natural, that moved like real hair, that made me feel like myself again, I thought maybe I could stop hiding. I'd walked into Hartwell that morning with my head up for the first time in months, catching approving glances from coworkers who'd only ever seen me in scarves and hats. 3 people complimented my hair before I even reached my desk. For exactly 47 minutes, I felt beautiful again. Then Claudine destroyed it all with one calculated movement and a room full of laughter that told me exactly where I stood in this office hierarchy. The bathroom stall became my hiding place as tears mixed with coffee stains on my blouse. I locked the door and finally let myself break down, shoulders shaking as I tried to muffle the sounds. The wig was unsalvageable. Melted patches where the hot liquid had burned through synthetic fibers, the carefully styled waves now a matted mess that smelled like burnt plastic and humiliation. I'd have to throw it away, which meant going back to scarves, back to hiding, back to being invisible. But as I sat there on that closed toilet seat, something shifted inside me. The tears stopped, replaced by something colder and sharper. Claudine thought she'd broken me with her cruelty, thought she could humiliate me into submission like she'd done to others before me. She didn't know that shame, when pushed far enough, transforms into something else entirely. I wiped my face, straightened my ruined wig one last time, and made myself a promise in that bathroom stall. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The whispers started immediately and followed me everywhere. "Did you see what happened to Alana? I heard it was a cheap wig anyway." Claudine said she looked ridiculous. I caught fragments of conversations that stopped abruptly when I walked past, saw smirks exchanged across desks, felt the weight of judgment everywhere I turned. Hartwell Marketing wasn't a huge company, just 80 employees across 3 floors, which meant gossip spread faster than wildfire. Claudine made sure the story lived on, dropping casual comments in team meetings about hair emergencies and coffee accidents, always with that sharp smile that dared me to respond. She'd corner people by the water cooler, retelling the incident with embellishments that made me sound even more pathetic. Within 3 days, I'd been nicknamed Barbie by the creative team, and someone left a toy wig from a dollar store on my desk with a note that read, "Backup plan." I documented every incident in a private notebook, writing down dates, times, witnesses, and exact words spoken. Something told me I'd need evidence eventually. That weekend, I downloaded a voice recording app and tested it obsessively, making sure it worked even when my phone screen was off. Monday morning, I positioned my phone carefully on my desk during our team meeting, the microphone aimed directly at Claudine's usual spot at the head of the conference table. She didn't disappoint. Within the first 10 minutes, she made 3 separate comments about my appearance, questioning whether my new look was professional enough for client meetings. "We need to present a polished image," she said, staring directly at me while everyone else studied their laptops. "Some of us might need to invest more in looking presentable." I kept my face neutral and let the recording capture every word. Over the next 2 weeks, I gathered hours of material, Claudine mocking my work in team settings, making degrading comments about my capabilities, and once, when she thought I'd left for lunch early, telling 2 junior employees that I was charity hire, who wouldn't last another year. Each recording was backed up to 3 separate cloud services, organized by date and tagged with keywords. I was building an arsenal. Testing the waters with HR felt necessary, even though I suspected it would fail. I scheduled a meeting with Patricia, the HR manager, and came prepared with printed transcripts of some of Claudine's worst comments. Patricia listened with a practiced expression of concern that never quite reached her eyes, nodding at appropriate moments and taking notes I suspected would never be reviewed. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and smiled that corporate smile I'd learned to distrust. Claudine does have a tough management style, she admitted, but she gets results. Sometimes strong personalities clash, and what sounds harsh might just be her way of pushing you to excel. The dismissal was wrapped in therapeutic language, but I heard the real message clearly. Claudine was protected, and I was not. As I left Patricia's office, I passed the wall of photos documenting company events and spotted one from last year's golf tournament. Claudine and Patricia, arms around each other's shoulders, holding a trophy together. The system wasn't going to save me. I'd have to save myself. Claudine's weakness revealed itself during a presentation to Northbrook Financial, one of our biggest clients. She built her entire pitch around research and data analysis I'd spent 3 weeks compiling, but she hadn't bothered to actually read my detailed notes. When the client's CFO asked about quarterly projections for the Midwest region, Claudine fumbled, mixing up numbers and contradicting herself within the same sentence. I watched from my seat at the back of the conference room as her confidence crumbled, saw the exact moment she realized she'd walked into the meeting unprepared. The CFO's expression shifted from interested to skeptical, and I knew we were about to lose a $1 million account. So I stood up, apologized for interrupting, and smoothly corrected the numbers while providing additional context that addressed the client's actual concerns. The presentation was saved, but more importantly, the Northbrook team now knew who actually did the work. As we packed up afterward, the CFO shook my hand and said, "You really know your stuff, Alana. We should work with you directly next time." Claudine's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, and I caught the flash of fear in her eyes before she forced a smile. That evening, I booked an appointment with Yvonne, a wig specialist who worked exclusively with women experiencing medical hair loss. Her studio is tucked into a quiet neighborhood on Chicago's South Side, and the moment I walked in, I felt safe. She listened to my story without judgment, then showed me options I didn't know existed. Human hair wigs that looked indistinguishable from natural growth, styles that would complement my face shape, colors that matched my skin tone perfectly. We settled on a sleek, shoulder-length style with subtle highlights, professional but striking. When she placed it on my head and turned me toward the mirror, I barely recognized myself. This wasn't just hair, this was armor. The next morning, I walked into Hartwell with my head high, and the office reaction was immediate. Conversations stopped mid-sentence, heads turned, and even the executives who usually ignored me did a double-take. Claudine stood by the coffee station, her eyes narrowing as she watched me pass. I met her gaze directly and smiled, not the nervous smile of someone seeking approval, but the calm smile of someone who'd stopped caring what she thought. Her grip tightened around her coffee mug. The email arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, and at first I thought it was spam. The subject line read FYI and be concerns, and when I opened it, I realized immediately that I wasn't supposed to be included. It was a thread between Claudine and 2 other senior managers discussing our Northbrook Financial client. But what made my pulse quicken was Claudine's assessment of Northbrook CEO, Marcus Thornton. Honestly, working with Thornton is exhausting. The man's a dinosaur in a suit, stuck in 1995 business practices. If we could just deal with his younger team instead of listening to his outdated rambling, we'd actually make progress on this account. I read it 3 times, my hands trembling slightly as I realized what I was holding. This wasn't just unprofessional, it was potentially catastrophic if it ever reached Thornton. I immediately forwarded the email to my personal account, then took screenshots and saved them to my evidence folder. My first instinct was to expose it immediately, but something stopped me. This kind of leverage was too valuable to waste on impulse. I needed to wait for the perfect moment. Instead of rushing to destroy Claudine, I focused on building myself up. Every project I touched, I completed ahead of schedule and above expectations. When junior staff members had questions, I answered them patiently and thoroughly, earning their trust. I started arriving 30 minutes early to help set up for client meetings, staying late to review proposals that weren't even my responsibility. Slowly, deliberately, I made myself indispensable. Colleagues who'd once gone straight to Claudine started coming to me first, knowing they'd get better answers and genuine support. I watched as Claudine noticed the shift, saw her eyes track the people entering my workspace, heard her voice get sharper when my name came up in meetings. She was losing control of her team, and she knew it. But instead of adjusting her behavior, she doubled down on the cruelty. She'd interrupt me in meetings, dismiss my suggestions before I finished explaining them, and assign me impossible deadlines designed to make me fail. Each time, I documented it. Each time, I stayed calm. I was playing the long game now. The sabotage was almost elegant in its simplicity. I arrived Monday morning to prepare for a major presentation to Lakefront Enterprises, only to discover my entire presentation file had been deleted from our shared drive. The meeting was in 90 minutes, and according to the system, the file simply didn't exist anymore. I watched 3 coworkers panic on my behalf, offering to help recreate slides from memory, but I just smiled and pulled out my laptop. What Claudine didn't know was that I'd learned early in my career to never trust shared drives completely. I kept local backups of everything important. Within 10 minutes, I'd uploaded my backup file to the presentation system and was rehearsing like nothing had happened. The presentation went flawlessly, and Lakefront signed a 3-year contract worth $2 million. But that evening, I did something Claudine hadn't anticipated. I checked the file deletion logs, which showed exactly which user account had removed my presentation at 2:30 a.m. Sunday night. The username was unmistakable, C. Thompson, Claudine's login. I added the screenshot to my growing collection, each piece of evidence another nail in the coffin she was building for herself. Claudine's birthday lunch was supposed to be a team-building event at Romano's, an Italian restaurant 3 blocks from our office. 20 of us crowded around a long table, forced smiles and obligatory gift contributions creating the illusion of workplace harmony. I sat near the end, quietly eating my pasta, when Claudine decided to make me her entertainment again. Well, at least Alana has fresh hair for the occasion, she announced loudly enough for the entire table to hear, gesturing toward my wig with her wine glass. Always important to look your best for celebrations. The table went awkwardly silent, everyone waiting to see if I'd shrink away like usual. Instead, I set down my fork, looked directly at her, and replied in a clear, pleasant voice. "That's true, Claudine. At least mine isn't falling out from stress." The silence deepened, but this time it was different. Someone at the far end coughed to hide a laugh. Another person suddenly found their water glass fascinating. Claudine's face flushed red, her mouth opening and closing without sound. I'd just done the unthinkable. I'd struck back publicly, and it had landed. After that lunch, everything changed between us. The gloves were off. 2 coworkers approached me separately the following week, both asking to speak privately. The first was Marcus from Accounts, who admitted that Claudine had reduced him to tears multiple times with her criticism of his work, always in front of others. The second was Keisha from Creative, who described being excluded from important meetings and having her ideas stolen by Claudine without credit. Both had been too frightened to speak up, worried about retaliation and job security in a tough market. When I told them what I'd been doing, the documentation, the recordings, the systematic collection of evidence, something like hope flickered in their eyes. They agreed to add their own experiences to the record, providing written statements and specific examples of Claudine's behavior toward them. Suddenly, I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was becoming the voice for everyone who'd suffered under Claudine's regime of casual cruelty. That weight felt heavy, but it also felt right. Marcus and Keisha weren't just allies. They were proof that Claudine's abuse was systematic, not just personal vendetta against me. The case I was building had just become much stronger. The Chicago Workplace Rights Coalition operated out of a modest office in the Loop, and I found them through careful online research. I submitted my evidence package anonymously at first, expecting maybe a form letter response. Instead, I received a phone call within 24 hours from an attorney named Dominique Warren, who specialized in workplace harassment and discrimination cases. We met at a coffee shop far from my office, and I spread out my documentation across the small table. Recordings, emails, screenshots, witness statements, everything organized chronologically in color-coded folders. Dominique reviewed it for nearly an hour, occasionally nodding or making notes. When she finally looked up, her expression was serious but satisfied. "This is one of the most thoroughly documented cases I've seen," she said. "You have a legitimate harassment claim here, possibly discrimination too, given the nature of the attacks on your appearance related to a medical condition." She explained my options, outlined potential outcomes, and agreed to represent me if the situation escalated to legal action. Walking out of that coffee shop, I felt lighter than I had in months. I finally had professionals in my corner who understood what I was facing. The team meeting started normally enough. Weekly updates, project deadlines, the usual Monday morning agenda. But 15 minutes in, Claudine decided to test me again. "Before we move on," she said, that familiar sharp edge in her voice, "I wanted to address something. Alana, I've noticed you've been quite sensitive about workplace humor lately. Like that coffee incident a few weeks back. We all laughed, but you seem to take it personally." She paused, looking around the table. "I'm just concerned that if your appearance requires that much maintenance, maybe you're not focused enough on your actual work responsibilities." The room went dead silent. But this time, my phone was face up on the table in front of me, the recording app clearly visible on the screen, the timer counting upward. Everyone could see it. Claudine's eyes dropped to my phone, and I watched the realization hit her. She'd just walked directly into a trap. "I'm recording all our meetings now," I said calmly. "For my own records. Just to make sure I don't miss any important feedback." Her face went white, then red, then white again. Nobody laughed this time. Nobody even moved. I'd just shown everyone that the game had changed. The client dinner at the Capitol Grill was supposed to be a relationship-building event with our top 3 accounts, including Northbrook Financial. Claudine had planned it meticulously, seeing it as her chance to shine in front of Marcus Thornton, the CEO she'd privately called a dinosaur. I attended as required, sitting strategically next to Thornton himself, while Claudine held court at the other end of the table. Throughout dinner, I made a point of asking Thornton thoughtful questions about his 30 years in the industry, genuinely listening to his insights about market evolution and business philosophy. At one point, I mentioned how much I admired leaders who maintained traditional values while adapting to modern challenges. Unlike some people who dismiss experience as outdated, I added with a smile. Thornton lit up, sharing stories about building Northbrook from a regional company to a national player. Down the table, I saw Claudine watching us, her jaw tight, knowing exactly what that dinosaur email would mean if Thornton ever saw it. As we left the restaurant, she caught up to me in the parking garage. "We need to talk," she hissed.
"Now."
The parking garage was nearly empty, our voices echoing off concrete walls. Claudine positioned herself between me and my car, close enough that I could smell her expensive perfume mixed with wine from dinner. "I know what you're doing," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "This little documentation game, befriending my clients, recording meetings, it ends now. If you ever step out of line again, if you ever embarrass me in front of colleagues or clients, you'll regret it. I'll make sure you never work in marketing again." Her finger jabbed toward my chest with each threat, not quite touching but close enough to feel like a physical assault. My heart pounded, adrenaline flooding my system. But I held my ground. 2 years ago, I would have backed down, apologized, promised to behave. Not anymore. "Funny," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the shaking in my hands. "That's exactly what I was thinking of telling you." I stepped around her and walked to my car, refusing to run despite every instinct screaming at me to flee. In my rearview mirror, I saw her standing alone in the fluorescent light, her confidence visibly shaken. She'd expected submission and got defiance instead. That fear in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. It was time to stop playing defense. The formal complaint took me 3 days to prepare, ensuring every detail was perfect and every piece of evidence properly indexed. I filed it on a Thursday morning, addressing it to Patricia in HR but carbon copying 5 other people: the head of our parent company, the CEO of Hartwell, the legal compliance officer, my attorney Dominique Warren, and the Chicago Workplace Rights Coalition. The complaint was 15 pages long, outlining systematic harassment, hostile work environment, retaliation, and potential discrimination related to my medical condition. I attached 20 audio files, 37 screenshots, 12 witness statements, and detailed logs of incidents spanning 4 months. Within an hour of sending it, I received an automated response confirming receipt. By noon, Patricia had called an emergency meeting with senior management. By 2 p.m., Claudine was summoned to the executive floor. I worked calmly at my desk throughout, responding to client emails and finishing a project proposal as if it were any other day. But inside, my heart raced with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. I'd just turned a personal battle into an official corporate crisis, and there was no going back now. Marcus stopped by my desk around 3. "Whatever you did," he whispered, "the entire management floor is losing their minds." The investigation meeting took place in the largest conference room on Monday morning. I arrived with Dominique, whose presence immediately signaled this wasn't a simple internal matter anymore. Patricia sat at the head of the table, flanked by James Hartwell himself, the company founder, and 2 people I didn't recognize who introduced themselves as external HR consultants brought in specifically for this investigation. Claudine arrived 10 minutes late, her usual confidence replaced by visible tension. For 2 hours, they reviewed my evidence methodically. The recordings played over the conference room speakers, Claudine's voice crystal clear as she mocked my appearance, questioned my competence, and made degrading comments. The emails were displayed on the large screen, including the dinosaur comment about Thornton. The file deletion logs showed her sabotage attempt. When Marcus and Keisha provided their testimony via video call, describing their own experiences with Claudine's harassment, I saw James Hartwell's expression harden. Patricia tried to frame everything as misunderstandings or management-style differences, but Dominique systematically dismantled each excuse with evidence. By the end, Claudine sat frozen in her chair, unable to defend herself against the mountain of documented proof. The room felt like a courtroom, and the verdict was already written on everyone's faces. The call came through during lunch, Marcus Thornton from Northbrook Financial, asking to speak with James Hartwell directly. I wasn't in the room, but Marcus later told me what happened. Apparently, someone had sent Thornton the dinosaur email, along with a polite note apologizing for unprofessional internal communications. The someone was anonymous, but we both knew who'd done it. Thornton was furious, not just at the insult, but at the disrespect it showed toward Northbrook's partnership with Hartwell. He made his position clear. Either Claudine Thompson was removed from all Northbrook accounts immediately, or Northbrook would terminate their contract and take their $2 million annually elsewhere. James Hartwell, who'd built his company on client relationships and reputation, had no choice. Within an hour, Claudine was suspended pending final review. Patricia announced it in a brief email to senior staff, using careful corporate language about personnel matters and investigation procedures. But everyone knew what it meant. Claudine's reign was over. I sat at my desk reading the email 3 times, each read making the reality sink in deeper. The woman who'd poured coffee on my wig, who'd made me the office joke, who'd tried to destroy my confidence and career, was finally facing consequences. And I'd made it happen. The office transformed overnight in ways I hadn't anticipated. People who'd avoided eye contact for months suddenly wanted to chat by my desk. Colleagues who'd laughed at Claudine's jokes about me now approached with awkward apologies or defensive explanations about not realizing how serious it was. Even Patricia treated me differently, her dismissive tone replaced by careful professionalism tinged with obvious nervousness about potential lawsuits. The whispers changed too. Instead of mocking my appearance, People speculated about what would happen to Claudine, whether there would be more investigations, who might be next. I focused on my work, taking over several of Claudine's accounts temporarily while management figured out permanent solutions. The projects ran smoothly without her interference, and clients seemed relieved to work directly with me instead of through her ego-driven filter. Marcus and Keisha stopped by my desk together one afternoon, both looking lighter somehow, as if a weight had been lifted. "Thank you," Keisha said simply, "for being brave enough to do what we couldn't." I told them they'd been brave too, that standing up together made all the difference. But privately, I knew I wasn't done yet. There was still one more move to make. The email to Marcus Thornton was brief and professional, carefully crafted with Dominique's review to ensure it couldn't be construed as improper. "Mr. Thornton, I wanted to personally apologize for the unprofessional communication you received regarding Northbrook Financial's partnership with Hartwell Marketing. While I wasn't involved in those specific communications, as the primary project coordinator for your account, I take responsibility for ensuring all interactions reflect the respect your company deserves. I've attached documentation of the incident for your records and understanding." Attached was the complete email thread where Claudine called him a dinosaur, along with dates showing the comments were made while she was actively managing his account. I sent it at 8 p.m. on Tuesday, knowing Thornton typically checked emails early morning East Coast time. His response arrived by 7 a.m. Wednesday. "Thank you for your transparency, Ilana. This confirms concerns I've had about Hartwell's account management. I'm requesting Claudine Thompson be permanently removed from any Northbrook-related projects. Additionally, I'd like to discuss you taking over as our primary contact moving forward." I forwarded his email to James Hartwell with a simple note. Client request attached. By noon, Claudine's suspension had been upgraded to termination. Her career at Hartwell was over. The announcement came during Friday's all-hands meeting, delivered by James Hartwell himself with unusual solemnity. "After careful consideration and a thorough investigation, we've made several leadership changes in our project management division. Effective immediately, Claudine Thompson is no longer with the company." He paused, letting that sink in. "Additionally, I'm pleased to announce that Ilana Brooks will be promoted to Senior Project Supervisor, overseeing our financial services accounts and managing a team of 8 coordinators." The conference room erupted in scattered applause, some genuine, some obligatory, some shocked. I sat in my seat, trying to process what had just happened. The position Claudine had held, the authority she'd wielded so cruelly, was now mine. James continued, outlining my qualifications, my project success rate, client satisfaction scores, and the additional accounts I'd secured through relationship building. When he finished and asked if I wanted to say anything, I walked to the front of the room on shaky legs. "Thank you for this opportunity," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "I'm looking forward to building a team culture based on respect, support, and excellence." As I looked out at my new team, I saw relief on most faces, especially Marcus and Keisha. This wasn't just a promotion, it was a complete reversal of power. Claudine's office had to be packed up, and I volunteered to supervise the process, needing closure as much as anything else. Her space was exactly as she'd left it: expensive desk accessories, framed awards, photos from company events where she stood at the center of attention. I boxed everything carefully, professionally, adding nothing that wasn't hers. But I included one item that wasn't company property, a small envelope containing a handwritten note. Inside, on simple cardstock, I wrote, "Some stains never wash out. Coffee was one. Your behavior was another. Best wishes in your future endeavors." I sealed it and placed it on top of her packed belongings, which would be couriered to her home address. The note wasn't cruel, it was honest. A final acknowledgement of what she'd done and what it had cost her. I didn't need to see her reaction or hear her response. The message was for me as much as for her, marking the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. As I closed the final box and labeled it with her name, I felt something release inside my chest, not quite forgiveness, but something close to peace. She'd tried to destroy me, and instead, I'd survived, fought back, and won. That was enough. 6 months later, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror on a random Wednesday morning, adjusting a new wig I'd purchased with my promotion bonus. This one was different, bolder, with rich burgundy tones that I never would have tried before. But as I looked at my reflection, I realized something fundamental had shifted. The wig wasn't armor anymore. It wasn't a disguise or a shield or compensation for something lost. It was just hair, and I was just me, Alana, senior supervisor, team leader, survivor of workplace warfare. The woman staring back at me was stronger than the person who'd walked into Hartwell that morning months ago, confident in new hair but still seeking external validation. I'd learned that real confidence doesn't come from appearance or from other people's approval. It comes from knowing you can fight for yourself, stand your ground, and refuse to accept cruelty as normal. Claudine had tried to make me small, but she'd accidentally taught me how powerful I could become. My wig wasn't just hair anymore. It was a crown I'd earned through battle. And nobody, ever again, would make me take it off in shame.